The Transport Sector Critical Firms Bill proposes to set up a designated entities regime for entities providing essential transport services. The bill requires approvals for ownership controls and changes and various notification requirements, for example, change of ownership, or where there are events which materially impede or impair the provision of such services, together with remedial directions. The bill provides for the amendments in 4 key legislations relating to air, sea, and land transport legislations, namely the Bus Services Industry Act 2015, the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore Act 2009, the Maritime and Port Authority Act 1996, and the Rapid Transport Systems Act 1995. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Workers' Party support the bill's intention to strengthen the resilience of key firms in the air, land, and sea transport sectors in Singapore, safeguarding their provision of essential transport services, enhancing resiliency, and shielding them from potential national security threats. However, I have some clarifications for the Minister. To start off, may I ask the Minister to share what were some of the risks observed in the prospective critical entities that drove the need for this bill and for the proposed amendments to the sectoral acts? Mr. Deputy Speaker, under this bill, only fit and proper persons may be given approval to 25%, 50%, or 75% controllers of designated entities. Will the government be publishing any guidelines in the subsidiary legislation on how a person is fit and proper as required under the Act, similar to what is envisaged in the recent Significant Investments Review Act, SIRA? Part 1, Section 33D and Part 4A, Section 27C of the bill enables the Minister to issue a special administrative order or other orders in relation to an entity who is a bus service licensee or a railway licensee, respectively, should the Minister be satisfied that one or more conditions be met. These conditions include, among other things, the Minister being satisfied that either type of licensee has contravened the conditions of their license, the licensee is unable to pay its debt, or in the interest of safety, security, and continuity of the provision of such services, or in the case of railway licensee having contravened the conditions of their license. However, the Minister could also administer such an order should they view such a decision as being in the public interest. Could the government provide greater clarity on what public interest entails within the context of the current bill? This is important as it will not only provide greater clarity for the management of the affected companies, it will also provide clarity and transparency to investors of such companies on the circumstances in which the government can exercise such powers. In fact, the recently passed SIRA Act empowered the government to impose controls on the shareholders and management of designated entities in the interest of national security. So on the other hand, the current bill proposes that the government be given similar powers over the shareholders and management of designated operating entities and designated entities in the public interest. Could the Minister elaborate on what would be the difference in the criteria for assessing national security and the public interest in the respective legislations? Aside from setting out the Minister's prerogative to issue certain orders and directions to designated entities, the bill also requires designated entities to report certain matters to the authorities. Under the bill, designated entities are required to notify authorities of any event that could materially impede their ability to carry out their essential transport services in Singapore. Should such a situation arise in future, in the interest of transparency, will the government be informing the public such events or even irregularities reported and the remedial actions taken? I also like to ask the government, what is the mechanism which it will put in place to ensure that it can carry out any preemptive checks on operators who are reluctant to report any such events or irregularities, or to ensure timely rectifications? While legislation would play a crucial role in buttressing the resilience of Singapore's public transport system, the importance of implementing operational measures should not be ignored as well. Part 4, Section 27D of the bill allows the Minister to halt a railway licensee from the provision of their services. However, in the event that there is no replacement operator willing to take over at short notice, for example, if they perceive such a move as being financially untenable, would LTA be in a position to take over the operation? In 2016, the then Transport Minister, Mr. Kobuwan, suggested that the LTA should enhance their operational and maintenance team to take over operations should the need arises. Would the government clarify whether LTA currently has the capacity to take over as the operator of last resort, and if not, whether there is an actionable plan or a roadmap towards such an outcome? Mr. Deputy Speaker, while 3 out of 4 Class 1 bus licensees are privately owned, SMRT and PSA Corporation are owned by Temasek and CAG is directly owned by the government. Given that PSA Corporation and CAG are already directly or indirectly owned by the government, in respect of these companies, are the proposed controls on ownership and key personnel in this bill redundant in any way? Does the government have any plans to divest its stakes in PSA or CAG? Apart from CAG, which will be designated as a Class 1 designated operating entity, does MOT or CAAS intend to designate the companies that the Minister has mentioned in his earlier speech as Class 2 designated operating entities? May I know what are the considerations for their designation? Have those entities been consulted on the designated entity framework, and have they provided any feedback on the impact that such designation might have on their operations? Does the Minister anticipate that the designate entity framework may in any way affect Changi's attractiveness, Changi Airport's attractiveness for investment from companies that may have more efficient and innovative or just different approaches to airport services? Clause 28 defines essential transport services in the CAAS Act as various services and facilities provided to support the operations at Changi Airport. Operations at Seletar Airport are thus not deemed to be essential transport services. Has Seletar been excluded from the designated entity framework because it only serves smaller aircraft, or will the framework eventually be extended to Seletar as well? Likewise, for the maritime sector, Clause 44 includes services such as bunker supply and delivery, salvage operations, and passenger ferry operations in the definition of essential transport services. To what extent will the current players be affected? For example, will all the current bunker companies supplying fuel within port limits be included? What about the companies that supply bunkers also in the outside port limits area? The provisions in the bill lack clearer framework that outline regulatory processes, procedures, criteria, and guidelines to help the government to regulate or operationalize in accordance with the intentions of this bill. I hope such details will be included clearly in the subsidiary legislation after the bill has been passed. Just now, Minister mentioned about the advisory guidelines, and I hope such guidelines will be included in the subsidiary legislation eventually. This is important, lest the lack of such details and transparency may affect investor confidence in the transport sector or in affected companies, particularly the certainty of their investment in the longer run. For the implementation of the CIRA, an Office of Significant Investments Review, OSIR, was set up. Will there be similar offices set up to implement the requisite governance regime required by this bill in all the different sector agencies involved? If so, what will be the regulatory or legislative powers granted to personnel involved? Finally, before I end, I would like to ask for the government's assessment of the impact on this bill on the economic competitiveness potential of the affected transportation sectors. And particularly for maritime and aviation, will there be any impact on Singapore's trade flows? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I look forward to the Minister's replies. Notwithstanding the clarifications I am seeking, the Workers' Party support the bill.